Hello everyone and welcome to Red's channel. This time we are talking about comparisons and we are discussing Maxi Enduro, the true flagships of all companies, because none like these bikes manage to bring together so many things. They can travel, they can go very fast, they can carry a passenger, and even the luggage is packed with technology. They are the ones with radar, adaptive cruise control. In short, all the possible and imaginable technology of a motorcycle can be found on this type of bike. It's a high-level comparison because the bikes competing are of the highest level. We're talking about the BMW R 300 GS with a robotic gearbox. ASA, Ducati Multistrada V4 S in the 2025 edition, so the most updated one. Harley-Davidson Pan America 12050 S, KTM Triumph Super Adventure S, and finally the Triumph Tiger 1200 GT Pro, all equipped with bags and all with the same tire for everyone, which is the Pirelli Scorpion Trail III, which is the best that Pirelli can currently offer in the Maxi Enduro segment. A new tire just recently released that might also hold some surprises for us. The motorcycles are all equipped with the same tire, because in our comparisons we use a single tire to put all the frames on the same level and be able to judge them better. These motorcycles are made for traveling, and that's what we did. We went to Sicily, we moved to the south looking for a bit of sun, which, however, we perhaps didn't find completely. We found roads of all kinds, from highways to mountain roads, from dry to hot to wet conditions, almost to the point of finding ice on the ground. To have a truly complete picture, we also brought a passenger, evaluated the capacity of the bags. In short, everything you can know about this segment, we will tell you. Let's go see how it went. And then at the end, we'll meet here in the studio to discuss the report cards together, because they will show you how the motorcycles performed, their strengths and weaknesses, and especially who won our comparison. Let's start.
As you well know, for all our comparisons, we choose the same tire to put all the bikes in the same condition, because tires are a very important variable and we want to judge the chassis and suspensions starting from the same base. And what base? Because this time we chose a new product from Pirelli. It's called Scorpion Trail III. And I have to say, guys, I thought it would be difficult to improve on the Trail 2, but here we really have a next step. But I will talk more specifically about the tire in a video dedicated to the tire test itself. Here, you just need to know that the tire is completely new, the profile has been revised, the compounds have been revised, with a dual compound for the rear and a single compound for the front. The grooves have been revised, which in some parts also resemble those of the Diablo, to provide a tire that overall is a bit more sporty. Because the front really makes an impression, but I won't go further. The protagonist of our comparison, Scorpion Trail III.
It is the GS that has broken every stylistic and technical bond with the past, and even before being noticed for its qualities, it attracts attention for its appearance. It is a motorcycle that we have already ridden and analyzed in every detail. And on Red you can find everything, but the true comparison with its closest competitors was still missing.
It's useful to remember that this is a completely new project, both in terms of engine and chassis. The frame, still made of steel, has completely new dimensions. A very particular mix with a short wheelbase and a very open front end, combined with a new aluminum rear subframe. The suspension still use the telelever and paralever system, but they have now become Evo, with a travel of 190 and 200 mm, and especially with dynamic electronic technology, DSA suspension adjustment that adapts the response while riding, also compensating for the load.
The seat is 850 mm from the ground, but with the unique lowering system that lowers the bike at the front and rear, it goes down to even 820 meters. BMW claims a weight reduction of 12 kilo for it, however, on our scale. The test bike still turned out to be the heaviest of the five. 255 kilos with 5 liters of fuel in the tank, which at most holds 19, the smallest capacity of all.
The engine has been completely redesigned, with the boxer architecture and shaft drive remaining unchanged, but now the displacement is 1300 cc, the power is a 145 HP, and the torque is a 149 Nm. The highest value among the participants in our comparison.
The test model is equipped with the automated shift assistant, ASA, the BMW system that allows automatic clutch operation and manual or automatic shifting mode is currently the only one offering it in the segment.
Starting price is 22,500 euros, but as we well know, with BMW, you pay for everything. The test bike comes to 29,795 euros, the most expensive in the comparison.
At this point, there is only one question. Will the Queen still be able to sit firmly on the throne of the Maxi Enduro? We'll see. Stay tuned.
Obviously, its position in the market is the one all competitors aspire to, because truly, many have been sold. We have already talked about it many times. On Red's channel, the comparison was missing, which obviously also highlights certain differences. We know the bike very well. BMW has done an excellent job with the front end because it's a bike that gives you an incredible feeling at the front, something that wasn't there before with the 1250, and it excels in throttle management, in the management of mappings, in that alchemy that BMW has managed to find between engine braking for entering corners and reopening the throttle. This still makes a bit of a difference and is what wins over the testers a little. In terms of ergonomics, the bike is small, it appears small, at least you can touch the ground well. Right now I'm in a bit of a sloped situation, so I can't plant my feet well. But the bike lowers, more than anything, it lowers at the front and back. Moreover, the lowering mechanism works very well. You don't notice it operating while you're riding, unlike others that we will discuss later. The ergonomics are very correct, the handlebar is just the right width, and the legs are bent just right. In short, you feel good on board. And when traveling, you experience what we've defined these days as subliminal comfort, which makes you arrive in the evening really not very tired, also because the bike vibrates very little practically. Yeah, not at all. The aerodynamic protection on the highway is not bad at all. The engine runs at about 4,600 RPM at a 130 km/h without vibrations. The electric windshield provides good protection, even if it seems smaller than the old one. In reality, the protection is very good. There are no turbulences. In short, the journey is very good. And I must say that the seat, compared to some competitors present here, is not the top of the segment. It's a little narrower, a little also harder, nothing too extraordinary. However, there are competitors that do better. We'll talk about that later. In terms of instrumentation, in my opinion, it's a small step back because we have always praised the BMW joystick, which allows everything to be done very quickly. The addition of the sandwich button up here with multifunction. In my opinion, it has slightly reduced the speed of execution for various commands. And also in terms of fuel consumption, it still remains one of the best. I must say that obviously the package here is super complete. In terms of driving, the agility of the BMW here with the forged wheels almost matches that of the Ducati and the Multistrada. They are the ones competing for the title of the bike, fastest in entering curves, more sporty in attitude, and then it would be necessary to see by points. We know that the variances have caused quite a few problems, but it's also true that the more spacious ones, at least both of them, can hold a full face helmet. So from this point of view, it's good, even though we know that, well, centralized locking, it's a bit of complexity that might not even be necessary on motorcycles. I'll also open a small parenthesis about the gearbox. ASA is automated, it's the only one to have it in comparison. Obviously, in certain situations, it makes a difference because not having to pull the clutch, which I must say works really well. The clutch management of the ASA is super perfect, and it also pairs well with the throttle management of the BMW, or when you're in traffic. In short, not having to pull the clutch, not having to shift with the quick shifter is convenient. But it wasn't, in a sense, the killer feature I thought it would be. The application that would make the GS take a leap in quality. Some small comments. Not everyone liked the feedback from the pedal, which is actually a joystick, so it doesn't have the physical sensation of shifting. Let's say that when using it in automatic mode, I would prefer to have separate mappings between the map, the throttle, and the gearbox map. Because in this way, you could have, for example, the throttle with a dynamic response, the gearbox in road mode, which in my opinion is the best solution. However, it remains an innovative solution, an additional option to purchase that only BMW currently offers, because KTM was studying it for the 1390 and it hasn't arrived yet, so we highlight it. But let's say that it was expected to be something that would truly make a qualitative leap. And in my opinion, it hasn't been. Anyway, we will see this in the points as well. Certainly, it will be the one, along with two others, in my opinion, that will compete for the top positions in the ranking, if not the overall victory. Because the package, in short, super competitive. BMW knows how to make the GS. They have been making them for almost 40 years and continue to evolve. Perhaps, well, the only thing I would say is that the 1250 in terms of the engine, even when compared, had a bit more personality. Sound-wise, but also in terms of mechanics, well, that character of the 1250 has diminished a bit. Here everything is very electric, very smooth. However, the engine's performance is amazing. It has incredible mid-range power. It stretches, it can run at 1500 RPM in 6th gear without any problem. From that point of view, I believe it is still the benchmark.
We'll see the points, how it will end.
Ducati certainly cannot remain indifferent to BMW's offensive without batting an eye. Thus, with the arrival of the new GS, Borgo Panigale has indeed responded with the 2025 edition of the Multi V4. Unlike the Bavarian model, it is not a new project, but a targeted revision of the previous model.
If we talk about pure power, thanks to its 170 HP, the V4 Gran Turismo remains the most high-performing engine in the segment, and of course in the comparison.
The Multistrada is also the bike most loaded with technology. Again, on the 2025 model, we find the extended deactivation that turns off the rear bank even while riding when the torque demand is low, allowing for reduced consumption, emissions, and heat.
The main interventions are nestled in the chassis, with a transfer of solutions from the Rally. The rear area comes from there, and now offers more comfort to the passenger, just as the fork with an internal position sensor is now more in tune with the semi-active skyhook system.
The travel is 170mm at the front and 180mm at the rear, the shortest of all the bikes on test. Ducati technicians have also announced a repositioning of the swing arm pivot, 1mm higher to improve both cornering precision and acceleration stability. The other new feature is the arrival of the forged wheels on the bike. In our test, they are optional, but they are quite expensive, yet they make the V4 even faster and sportier.
A step forward also for the braking system, now with a distribution system. Rear to front, where the rear brake pedal in ride mode touring sends some power to the front calipers as well.
Weight measured with 5 liters of fuel is 243 kg with an adjustable seat height from 840 to 860. But like BMW and Harley, Ducati also adds the rear lowering system, and in this version the front radar as well, which includes the forward collision assist.
All of this comes at a cost. The Multistrada has a starting price of 26,190 euros, but equipped like the test bike, it costs 29,460 euros.
Ducati Multistrada V4 S 2025 here in the radar setup and with forged wheels, which are the new feature that Ducati introduced this year on this bike. So here I have to say, man, what are usually called minor changes by the English, but they make a big difference. A millimeter of pivot means a lot in terms of squat, that is the lowering of the rear when accelerating. The bike is more stable. During acceleration it squats less, so it has more load on the front end, and therefore you like the bike more. I must say that in terms of riding, the 2025 Multistrada is a confirmation. It impressed me, surprised me, and I liked it because with the forged wheels, the counter-rotating crankshaft has an execution speed that is truly impressive. Perhaps with all these small modifications that aren't really that small, because forged wheels, as you know, save a lot of weight, reduce inertia, and provide more speed, but slightly less steering presence when defining the line. However, these are really minor details that are negligible compared to the advantage that these wheels provide, which I recall BMW has also installed. I must say that in terms of riding, in my opinion, it is the most consistent motorcycle in terms of suspension. The one with the best suspension setup, probably alongside KTM, because I also like KTM from that perspective. It moves very little, now even with this system, so it moves very parallel, creating a terra-lever effect, making the motorcycle very flat in its behavior. And I must say that the mappings are all well differentiated. The suspension settings in touring and on the sport are excellently balanced. Comfort is never compromised, but there is always great control. So from this point of view, the Multistrada has really made another small step forward, not so small actually, which makes it even more effective to ride at the engine level. Everyone aspires, in my opinion, to find that magical alchemy of the GS ASA, and Ducati has come very close to it. Perhaps there is a little more engine braking, but the throttle management on opening is absolutely perfect, and the bike rides really well. The rear cylinder deactivation, well, here a small side note needs to be made. I must say that those who use these bikes often seek smooth operation at very low revs. The V4, which is still the most fractionated engine, the smallest, the most powerful as we know, but also the one with a bit less torque when traveling at very low revs by deactivating the cylinders to reduce consumption and lower the temperature in the seating area. Let's say that today, well, the heat on the bike wasn't a problem, but it did lose a bit of smoothness precisely in that range, in that regime from 2000 to 4000 RPM, where perhaps someone else would prefer to have a super smooth engine that responds super precisely. There is a lot of precision, but there's a bit more roughness in operation. However, this needs to be taken into account when riding. Then at medium and high revs, This engine is incredible. When it goes above 6,000 RPM, it becomes truly phenomenal, coupled with a whole setup of chassis, suspension and brakes that in my opinion are the excellence of the segment. I'm not crazy about the rear to front in the touring mapping, meaning when you brake with the rear, it transfers the braking to the front. The BMW GS also has this, but in my opinion, it has a less pronounced effect on the front brake, because the front brake of this bike is more effective. I might have calibrated it with a bit less power on the front, but that said, the ABS can be set in each riding mode, so if you don't like it, you can turn it off. If you switch to the sport mapping, the sport riding mode on IE, this system is deactivated, and in that case, I would like the rear brake to be a little more effective. It's better than the old Multistrada, but perhaps a little more wouldn't have been bad. The bags are well integrated into the bike, and you can even fit a helmet. On the 2025 Multistrada, there's a lowering system that lowers the bike by 10 millimeters at the rear. I must say that compared to those of BMW, Triumph and even Harley, it operates a little more noticeable. So when you go below 10 km/h, the bike lowers at the back. It lowers a bit more abruptly than the others. With the others, you don't even notice it. Here, you can feel the bike lowering. Nothing major, but in return, you can touch the ground well, you can touch better than before, and so this is an advantage. It's a bit firm in terms of padding, even more so than KTM, which brought us the bike here. Now we'll see it with the comfort seat. So they played a bit of a wild card, but let's say the padding here is indeed a bit hard. It's true that it's very cold, so when it's cold, the padding tends to be a bit stiffer. So when it's hot, maybe other padding that is so comfortable here becomes too soft in the heat. We'll have to see, but if I had to travel for many hours, as we are doing right now, I would prefer a saddle with padding that's a bit soft. The space on board, because by extending it a bit, the rear part has benefited. The passenger has benefited, as has the rider. So from this point of view, very good, excellent aerodynamic protection. We even close the upwash here with these little doors, because on days like these, it gets almost too cold on the legs. I have to say that, well, if I had to travel, this is probably the bike I would choose among those here to take me on an intercontinental trip with fun, because it mixes almost perfectly the touristic situations and the super sporty ones. Well done, Ducati. I don't know where this project can be improved, but in my opinion, it will fight. To the last point, we'll see how it goes.
In the United States, they don't worry too much about what happens overseas and continue to go their own way. That is, to carry on the philosophy that has inspired the Pan America project since its inception. A bike that certainly doesn't lack character, and not just when stationary.
Its heart is the 60-digger V-twin engine with 1250cc, capable of 150 HP and 125 Nm of torque. Numbers that, in terms of performance, place it in the middle of the contenders for the title. If the engine is refined, the same can be said for the chassis, which, leveraging the engine's load-bearing function, focuses on the suspension. These are high-quality semi-active Showa with a 47mm fork and 190mm of travel, like the rear suspension.
Still on the topic of suspension, the Pan America was the first Max Enduro to offer a lowering system as standard to facilitate both mounting the bike and low-speed maneuvers. The system is called ARH and allows the bike to lower by up to 5 cm and maintain that stance even at reduced speeds.
The braking system is top-notch thanks to the two 320mm front discs with Brembo monoblock calipers. Its off-road nature is no secret. And this is evidenced by the fact that for 2 consecutive years, Johan Pedrero finished the Africa Icarus with a completely stock Pan America. The electronics of the Pan America are also top-notch with 7 ride modes, including 2+1 custom dedicated to off-road.
Its massive appearance, however, should not be deceiving, because on the scale, the Harley-Davidson weighs 240 kilo with 5 liters of gasoline, and only KTM is lighter. Let's conclude with the price by far. The most enticing, starting at 2,500 euros, but the bike in comparison is at 21,750 euros.
Harley-Davidson, Pan American, 1250R. We left Harley-Davidson in 2021, I believe, with the hope of seeing it again in these comparisons and also seeing it evolve, because the project was just at the beginning. In reality, what I can tell you is that Harley, in my opinion, has continued a bit on its own path. The 1250 engine has plenty of power. Let's say it reaches
a point where these bikes don't need it, meaning a bit at other revs, because it's true that there's a lot of smoothness in the ride. The engine doesn't jerk too much and can handle low revs when going slow. However, when you go to open the throttle again, there are two slightly different situations. The road mapping, let's call it, with the road symbol, has a very saturated throttle and thus a somewhat overly filtered response. The sport mapping has a slightly more direct throttle, but also a bit of on-off. That's quite annoying. And from this point of view, let's say I would have expected a bit more progress from the engine, also because the gearing remains very, very long. When you do those stretches that you might manage with the GS or even with the Multistrada in a high gear, even in sixth, here you have to go down to third because the engine always struggles a bit. I believe that with 3 more teeth on the sprocket, this bike could be a bit more lively. The strengths of this bike, which it certainly has, include the seat padding, which in my opinion is one of the best in comparison. The seat itself, due to its shape, is quite flat but provides really good support. The aerodynamic protection, especially in the upper part, is excellent because the windshield and deflectors effectively divert the airflow. However, the legs are a bit more exposed. Dynamically, the Harley is the most stable bike you will find here in the comparison. It was already stable before, not by chance, as its chassis dimensions are very stretched out, with the longest wheelbase, the most open trail and the most open steering angle. Additionally, in this latest version, they have also added a steering damper, which makes it almost a bit too much on the other side. Let's say that when you seek a bit of agility, the steering feels a bit stiff and the bike is a bit harder to move from a standstill, requiring a bit more physical effort to ride. So, the travel comfort is not bad, but the position is a bit peculiar. The foot pegs, as I'll show you, are quite forward and also quite high, resulting in the leg being a bit more bent and the handlebar a bit low. However, the handlebar can obviously be adjusted. Navigating through the menus is a bit complex. There are bikes that are easier in this regard. The saddlebags are not bad, sufficiently spacious and quite well integrated. There are also integrated mounts on the bike. In terms of suspension and brakes, there are Showa components. I really like the semi-active Showa, but the tuning here doesn't quite convince me. I always find them a bit too soft. On the road, it's very comfortable. The bike really leans towards comfort. In sport mode, it's still a bit soft, but it does absorb the bumps somewhat, so I wasn't completely convinced. The fork, even during braking, has a somewhat peculiar anti-dive system, which didn't really impress me. The brakes are sufficiently powerful, but you have to pull the lever quite a bit, both for the front and rear brake. It's the only one with a cable clutch, which isn't the softest, but it's also not the hardest in the comparison. So the Pan America does have some strengths, especially if you're looking for comfort or a bike with an absolutely original look. Many people like this look because it's completely different from everything else. You can definitely find a good travel companion in it. The seat, as mentioned, is the best of all. However, in terms of vibrations, performance and riding dynamics, let's say, there's definitely still a considerable way to go. We'll see later how it ranked, but let's say it was certainly a good first attempt because I didn't expect such a surprisingly dynamic motorcycle from Harley. Of course, there are indeed others that are moving forward, so there's still some work to be done here. We'll see the points later.
Due to the well-known corporate events that require KTM to remain calm at the moment, waiting to settle the accounts, the arrival of the announced 1390 adventure is not imminent. Natural participant in the Maxi Enduro comparison could only be the 1290 Super Adventure S.
A motorcycle that is nonetheless more than worthy of competing. This challenge is about performance, technical content and riding pleasure. We have known and appreciated the engine and chassis for a long time. The frame is a steel trellis paired with semi-active suspensions branded VP. The fork and shock travel is 200 meters, identical to Triumph and the highest among the contenders. Speaking of height, the seat is adjustable from 849 to 869 meters. The 75 Ducati LC8 V-twin engine delivers 160 HP and 138 Nm of torque. Figures that only Ducati, in terms of power, and BMW, in terms of torque, are able to surpass.
The K excels in other main features, objective data with a 23-liter fuel tank made in 3 pieces, 4 liters more than BMW's. And the weight of 232 kg measured by our scale with 5 liters of fuel, the lightest of all.
Its vocation as a long-distance machine is also emphasized by the electronic package, with radar, adaptive cruise control, a sophisticated navigation software, 5 ready modes, 2 of which are off-road.
Thanks to ongoing promotions, the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S can be parked in your garage at a very attractive price.
KTM Super Adventure S, let's say that the big absentee from the comparison is definitely the 1390, which we know we will have to wait a little longer for. However, I have already been able to try it in a very brief preview test. If you want to check it out on the channel, I'll link it when I went to Japan to test the Bosch radar management systems for motorcycles. I must say though that the 1290 still plays its cards very, very well. Honestly, I didn't remember a 1290 being so refined. It's always a sporty bike, always quite aggressive with great character. The twin cylinder is loved by some for its visceral power because in terms of thrust and character, it's one of the best out there. However, in comparison, it has always been a bit rougher, or rough, as the English say. In reality, the evolutions of the project, perhaps even subtly carried out by KTM, have made this bike much more pleasant to use even when riding slowly. The throttle management is phenomenal if we consider the 1301 cubic centimeter pistons, the VD75 architecture, how manageable the throttle is. Truly surprising with the trade-off of a very, very free engine brake. Here we return to the alchemy I mentioned about BMW, where the sort of perfect mix between engine braking, quattro, and throttle reopening is what everyone tries to achieve. Here we have a perfect throttle reopening, but the engine brake is very free, so you have to get used to using the rear brake a lot, which, by the way, works very well and is almost one of the best, in my opinion, for managing cornering. It's a big but small motorcycle, big in the sense that when you get on board you find a tank, the largest, I must say, of the comparison, 23 liters, which widens very quickly. So let's say it spreads your legs quite a bit. However, at the same time, the handlebar is small, and when you go on the tip of the boot, as you can see, you have little space to move your feet back. The position is quite nice and dominant. A motorcycle that is a bit more physical than the others when entering a curve, thus maintaining that KTM characteristic of having a strong presence on the ground and a behavior almost like a sports bike in terms of physical demand. Even though probably within the motorcycle segment, among the competitors we have here in comparison, it is the one that has benefited the most from the arrival of the Scorpion, because they have really sped it up, as has a truly deadly advantage, and so it has certainly benefited from it. The engine, as mentioned, is phenomenal, and the gearbox is beautiful. Although when you go under torque with the throttle pinned, the quick shifter is too slow in its cut. However, the gear engagements are good even with the clutch, which is the softest of all, so it has many positive aspects, including aerodynamic protection. The windshield extends quite a bit at the top, and is probably the one that protects your shoulders the best. Some turbulence does occur, but nothing significant. Then I repeat, the passenger is not so well accommodated. The seat is not that wide. It has its sporty side. However, I must say it surprised me, because since the last time I rode it, it's like, I wouldn't say a different bike, but it has certainly been refined quite a bit. And in terms of suspension, in my opinion, along with Ducati, it is absolutely one of the best. Moreover, it's the only one that allows you to activate or deactivate the forks anti-dive. You can adjust the preload in percentage. You know, it has many positive aspects. However, the front braking requires a bit more pull than I would like, as I was saying. The suspension and forks are very consistent with each other. With Ducati, in my opinion, it's one of the best. BMW, on the other hand, tends to move a bit at the rear. This bike has active cruise control with radar, and I must say it works well, but not as well as Ducatis or BMWs. In my opinion, Ducati does better than all the bikes in this department, because it tends to maintain distance but accelerates a bit, and quite often it's much less smooth, let's say, in managing speed. These are minor details, but they still make a difference.
I would say that KTM has almost arrived as a replacement for the 1.390. But in reality, I discovered that it's a bike that still has a lot to offer today. And so, welcome the 1.290 as long as it's on the market. In my opinion, there will be a lot of fun to be had with it. Here's one last thing. It's a bike that is not equipped with a lowering device, and is the only one among the bikes present that doesn't have a lowering device either in the front or the back. Which means that in the end, it's a bit more difficult to manage, because, as you can see, the seat is high. We'll go and see the points, how it will end. KTM 1290 Adventure S. Nice surprise.
Are you looking for a Maxi Enduro with a shaft drive? Triumph is the only real alternative to the BMW GS and the new version of the Adventure from Inkley, right? Last year, it was introduced with a significant update, bringing numerous improvements to engine inertia, clutch, balance, and of course for travel, the seat.
A very complete motorcycle, finished with the usual care and quality. Triumph offered moreover at a really interesting price. We're talking about 24,000 euros flat for the test motorcycle.
At the heart of the project, we still find the inline 3-cylinder engine with 1160cc, a 150 HP, 130 Nm of torque. Its architecture is different from all the competitors' engines, yet it has been made smoother and more fluid thanks to some targeted interventions on its components, particularly the crankshaft.
The frame, however, has not been touched, but some components have been optimized, such as the handlebar risers, which are now cushioned to reduce vibrations, the handlebar itself, and the seat, which has a more horizontal profile, with the aim of achieving greater comfort. The foot pegs have also been raised and brought closer to the frame to have more ground clearance.
The frame and suspensions are in the spirit of continuity, steel tubular with subframe. The first can be aluminum and Showa, the latter semi-active, as is now required for motorcycles of this type. The travel is generous. We are at 200 mm per wheel. As much as KTM Triumph, for its part, has its own version of the seat lowering system, which acts on the preload of the rear suspension. Will 3 cylinders and high quality be enough to aim for the title? We will see.
Triumph Tiger 1200 about this motorcycle. We talked about it last 2024 on red. It's the 2024 version with some adjustments at the handlebar level to reduce vibrations and foot pegs, to touch the ground less, and also to have more ground clearance. It has also slightly changed the seat, which I can confirm. In my opinion, it remains one of the best. It's a seat that I would like on many other motorcycles present here in the comparison, for how it is shaped and also for how it is padded, with really well chosen foam, very slim here in the central part. It's one of the motorcycles you can approach more easily. You touch the ground very well. It has the rear lowering system, which, however, is not automatic, let's say, like that of Ducati and BMW. It's a travel bike and a great touring motorcycle for sure. It's 1160cc engine, a 3-cylinder, is phased to run somewhat like a twin-cylinder. In terms of torque, it has quite a lot of performance, but it also comes with a much longer gear ratio. 4,500 RPM at 130 km/h compared to, for example, the 5250 of the Ducati V4 Multistrada and the 4800 of the GS. I don't know why they decided to have such a long gear ratio on this bike. Surely the fuel consumption can benefit from it, though. The result is that you might want a bit more liveliness at low revs. You'd want a bit more of it. Dynamically, the bike is very comfortable with Showa suspensions. Here, I like them much more than those on the Harley. They have good hydraulic control both front and rear. They are consistent, but always tuned on the soft side, even when you set them to the sport mapping. The suspensions always remain tuned on the soft side. By adding up saddlebags, the bike has automatic preload like the GS. It reads the load and then it adjusts. The preload of the shock absorber, but in this case, in my opinion, it's not a job done perfectly, because the bike always remains a little more settled, and despite the 150 rear tire, it remains not the most agile bike. In return, it gives you a really significant steering presence. Triumph does not have the integrated mounts in the tail section. So to mount the saddlebags, you need to install the frame, not only for these aluminum ones, but also for the others. And it makes the bike much wider with the saddlebags, and you can't even fit a helmet inside. So from this point of view, I think something better could be done. There are others where it seems you can fit a helmet, but they are even more cumbersome. The engine, as I was saying, has improved in terms of vibrations. Certainly, it remains, let's say, the weak point of the bike, the play in the cardan transmission that somewhat undermines the good work done by Triumph on this 3-cylinder. Because in the end, the on-off effect you get when you close and reopen the throttle is a bit disturbing. It's clear that if you put it on the highway, activate the cruise control and go straight, this bike becomes almost unbeatable. The protection is very good. The heat transmission is very good. I'm going from memory in this case because I remember that the 1200 we tested in the rally was one of the best from this point of view, because it's too cold today to judge that. The windscreen protection is good, but it's a bit narrow and leaves your shoulders exposed. And so let's say Ducati and GS do a little better in the upper part. However, in the lower part, I must say very well. Braking is very good. I liked it. In my opinion, it's one of the best. Triumph on the brakes, in short, is always quite a guarantee. The rear In my opinion, it will get a nice 30 on the front, maybe a bit of a bike that's too aggressive, but together it's really top level braking. Returning to the engine, I'm talking about the gearbox, which isn't bad, but the cutoff times are a bit long, a bit slow, especially when going slowly. In short, I would like a gearbox a little faster in the engagements and cutoff times. The bike that is designed, as I said, in my opinion, for traveling, so much so that here, Michael Neves, who positions these bikes as touring bikes, ends up preferring it because he says, if I have to do 1,500 kilometers in one go, Triumph is one of those I would choose. And indeed, he's not entirely wrong because the comfort is really top notch then when you start riding. So it also depends a bit on how do you want to position the bike, more on the sporty side or more on the touring side. And so your choice might fall on a Triumph or a Multistrada or a GS, depending on what you, or on a KTM, depending on what you want to do. Here we are really almost on a GT. From that point of view, I'm not saying it's a bike that's not enjoyable dynamically, but compared to the others present here in the comparison, obviously it positions itself more, let's say, on that side, on the tourist side. Some things that, in my opinion, are really valuable are precisely the overall comfort. Instrumentation, as we have already mentioned when talking about Triumph, is very simple in operation, but at least our trip, I would like it to always be visible at the instrumentation level. Let's say that, in my opinion, the ranking in terms of readability is there BMW, then KTM, then Ducati, Harley, and also Triumph. In short, they are more or less there because here there is really little information, very clear. But so maybe you always have to activate the joystick, which sometimes is not so precise, even in engaging the mapping. Small things that, however, during a day of riding, in the end, everything is somewhat noticeable. We'll see how the points will end up. And in my opinion, Triumph, I repeat, great touring bike, a bit less dynamic. When you want to ride hard, maybe it shows some limits, but in my opinion, it is still a valid bike.
Well, here we are. We have reached the end of our comparison, almost 500 kilometers of driving on roads, truly of every kind, and also with every type of surface, and also with every type of temperature. First of all, I thank Michael Neves for participating with us in this event. It was tough, but we managed to put together our ruthless report cards. I'll explain how we vote. From 18 to 30 points, we have about 30 items divided into 3 areas, which are engine, ergonomics, and comfort, and chassis. And as you can see from the tables for each area, we have the green dots and the green points, which are the ones that specify the model that scored the most points. In that particular area, I'll go quickly. So at least you can see all the signs, you have all the results. Speaking of the engine, in first place we have KTM with 1260 points. In second place we have Ducati with 1247 points. In third place BMW with 1228 points. In fourth place Triumph with 1099 points. In fifth, Harley-Davidson with 1020. In this case, the engines win, let's say the more advanced ones, especially KTM. It really surprised us because its LC8 is a very powerful, very aggressive product, but also extremely easy to use. Ducati did very well with the V4, even though it lost a bit in terms of power delivery at low revs. So, due to the deactivation of the rear cylinders, BMW, with its usual boxer engine that everyone envies, but in the end, KTM wins in the scoring. If we talk about ergonomics and comfort instead, as you can see from the green points, BMW wins hands down, 1548 points. You can see that BMW is a motorcycle that was born many years ago, very well developed over the years and has almost become perfect. Incarnation of the Maxi Enduro. You will see zeros where there is heat transmission because the temperatures were very low, so we were unable to adequately assess the heat transmission. Therefore, we preferred not to rate this aspect. A small note in the upper table, the one about the engine, which I will show you again, as you can see. Harley has 0, the quick shifter feature, which is obviously not present, but this quick shifter row that you see a bit in gray, the sum, it does not add to the total score because, for fairness, we did not want to add it and skew the ranking. In this case, as I told you, going back to ergonomics, BMW shows that the others still have a little something. They have a bit to do to reach the level of the GS. Let's talk about the chassis in the end. Here, the green points are somewhat distributed, but say that Ducati, as you can see, is the one that stands out above all the others. I must say that Ducati shows the best balance between sportiness and comfort, and excellent suspensions department. Brakes, the forged wheels make them super fast to use, so it rightly earned many points. Wins with 1299 points in the chassis category, second place with 1265 points for BMW, And just 1 point behind with 1264 points is the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, indicating that despite this bike being in run-out, because the 1390 is already arriving, which I have already tested, so I was one of the few in the world to be able to test it. However, the 1290 is still an extremely competitive bike. The others are a bit behind, which are Harley and Triumph, mainly, indeed, due to the very long gearing of their engines, which makes them a bit smoother in power delivery, and Triumph in particular, also due to a transmission play that should not be underestimated. If we talk about fuel consumption, let's say there are two motorcycles that stand out from the others, particularly BMW and also Harley-Davidson, with an average consumption of 15 kilometers per liter, while a little more distant, Triumph, and a bit lower, a classic for Ducati and also for KTM, is 30.22 kilometers per liter. There is always this small gap of about 1.5 kilometers in the consumption between BMW and Ducati, despite the fact that Ducati has adopted cylinder deactivation, which has also caused it to lose a bit of smoothness at low speeds, so it needs to be considered in the future whether this kind of activity is worthwhile. Equipment is an important factor. BMW wins overall with 63 points, Ducati 56, KTM 50, Triumph 49, Harley-Davidson 48. We are dealing with motorcycles, however, with really significant equipment. Let's also talk about the passenger, because he also voted, he was evaluated. We assessed the seating position, leg room, obstructions with possible bags, ease of getting on, ease of getting off. In short, everything a passenger might judge. And in this case, Ducati wins because the new Multistrada V4 S effectively inherits the entire rear section of the V4 Rally. It's clear that by increasing the seat space, increasing the space for the passenger, it won. Also because in terms of aerodynamic protection, it turns out to be slightly better. Following closely is BMW, then Harley-Davidson, which from the comfort point of view performs really well. Because the Pan America, both in terms of air protection and the foam of the seat, as well as in terms of space for the passenger, it is a very, very competitive motorcycle just behind it, mainly because of the bags, which make it a bit difficult to get on, but the rest anyway works well. And KTM, which is a very large motorcycle at the front, but quite small in terms of rider and passenger space. Not surprisingly, it is one of the sportiest. We conclude finally with the final ranking. You have seen all these nice tables. The final ranking that sums up the score of all the riders who have ridden, the passenger score, the equipment, the fuel consumption, the weight, the evaluation of the bags. Because we also evaluated that, the capacity to hold a helmet, the bulk, the weight of the bags, and so on, and the price is not the last factor, because we give points for the equipment, but we deduct points if a motorcycle costs more, so as to also balance things out. Because it's clear that making a motorcycle with a lot of equipment, but that costs little, would be the best thing for everyone. In the end, the result is that Ducati wins. This comparison with 48 points, followed by BMW with 48.7, and then KTM, surprisingly, I must say, because I didn't expect such a refined KTM to use 46.91 points, and then Triumph with 44.97, a perfect motorcycle for traveling, for covering long distances. But when you go to ride in the curves, the transmission play is a bit disturbing. And finally, Harley-Davidson with 42.19. Comment on Harley-Davidson. It's the first Maxi Enduro that Harley makes, and it's competing with the sacred monsters of the segment. Still a bit behind in terms of design, but the foundation to be very competitive is there. That's all we have to say about our comparison on the 2025 Maxi Enduros, the first of the year, but you will find more on our channel. We look forward to your comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.